There's never been a better time to live in the Galactic Co-Prosperity Sphere, or GCPS for short. As the spheres expand, thousands of citizens just like you embrace the warm and comforting nature of the GCPS across the entire universe. Live a life of luxury and never work another day in your life, where your only worry is if your favorite team will win the big dreadball match. The future is here, and life couldn't be better in the beautiful, bountiful, and safe GCPS.
The GCPS is not what it's all cracked up to be. Worlds shattered, cultures desecrated, greed rampant, and the name of the game is control. All that glitters is not gold. Don't believe the fantasy utopia they try to tell you. The core worlds are an unrealistic goal that can never be reached. The GCPS has been peddling lies for decades, and the time to fight back is now. The rebellion, or Rebs for short, is less of a faction and more of a movement. Every group of Rebs fights for their own motivation. Many Rebs have banded together after the GCPS has ruined their lives in one way or another. Some are fighting for the freedom of the galaxy, and others are just looking for an excuse to make some quick cash on the side. Since the rebellion isn't well organized, doesn't have a central leader, or strong in numbers relative to the power of the GCPS, Rebs are often the scrappy underdogs and ragtag guerrilla fighters that put their skills to the test to fight their oppressors. They might not have the best armor or the best weapons, but they have the willpower and motivation to take on any and all challengers to meet their goals. Rebs utilize the fact that they have so many different races under one umbrella to their advantage, which means that each type of alien or specialist tends to be pretty good at one thing. Building Rebs teams will often feel pretty disjointed, and that's sort of intentional. Your strike team will often be a grab bag of cool stuff, where each unit feels differently from one another, and that's kind of one of the biggest draws for the army. There are enough selections that you can make some theme lists within the Rebs as well, like my battle report with the all-monkey list, or the numerous reports of people talking about the Shark Attack Rebs factions, where they run a lot of Sphere. However, I think the best plan for building a list revolves around embracing the variety, and getting a little bit of everything all of the time, so that you can problem solve with the various tools. Most point costs for the Rebs are pretty cheap, so you can fit a lot of different stuff into a single list. Generally speaking, Rebs don't have great survive stats, and their armor is pretty dang low compared to a lot of the other factions out there. So you'll have to be careful with your model placement, and don't be afraid to run and hide, or just play the objective rather than killing your enemies flat out. Rebs are by far the most diverse faction in Deadzone in all respects, from lore and motivations to playstyle and model selection. The Rebs encompasses a vast collection of alien races working together to fight for what they believe in, and it really comes across in their playstyle and models in the faction. Welcome to the first faction focus of Deadzone 3rd Edition. So strap in, get a beverage, and let's free ourselves from the corporate control together. Woo! Go Rebs! Let's kick it off with the Shio Silverback, the most expensive but certainly the most hardy leader option. Don't let the model's intelligent pose fool you. This guy moves quickly across the battlefield with a move stat of 2-3 and a fight of a 4+. He's an absolute hammer with smash and size 3, so he usually gets a ton of dice in every combat. But just like his specialist brothers, the most impressive stat on him is HP 5 with armor 1. It takes half an army to bring this dude down, seriously. Tactician 1 is fine, and his splat allows some really cheeky play options, especially against close combat focused opponents. I think it's easy to get hung up on the gimmick of the monkey pounce thing, and overlook the fact that the splat can sneak you out of a cube into safety or onto an objective with any model in your strike team. Overall, he's a really powerful beat stick, tanky leader, and a great option. The Rebel Cell Leader comes in 3 flavors and really shows off the customization that you can do with the Rebs faction. The stat line's pretty good, the 4+ shoot is nice, obviously, but the real reason to take the Cell Leader is the Tactician 2, Recon 4, and the Splat. If you ask me, this is one of the most interesting splats in the game, especially because the Reb stat lines are all over the place. Many Rebs profiles are really good at one thing, but then the rest of the stats are generally pretty bad. And this splat kind of allows you to mitigate that by swapping around your stat profile based on what you need at the time. Let's discuss the 3 different flavors. The first one is the Human, and it's the cheapest, clocking in at 28 points and only offering up 2 victory points if you're killed. This is a good budget option, and while the whole point of taking this variant is to just not die, because they generally don't do a whole lot else. Combat team training is cool, but you have to be taking heavy casualties for it to even come up, so I wouldn't exactly say it's a selling point. This is the sit back, hide, and keep the TAC-2 coming. That's really all this variant is for. Sphere is obviously the offensive boost, now sporting a Meta Magma Lance that has AP2. The only danger with this is that if you're using this model as an offensive piece, it's much more likely to be vulnerable to getting killed, and if this guy dies, your Tactician 2 dice disappear, and your opponent gets 3 victory points instead of 2 compared to the human guy. It's a risk-reward thing, and since AP2 is kind of rare in the Rebs list, it might be worth the investment, but you'll have to make that call for yourself. Finally, the Rin variant is truly the jack of all trades. He's got Weight of Fire 1, Frenzy 1, but suffers from having shorter range. This version has a similar issue to the Sphere because if you want to get him involved, he might be vulnerable to getting killed. Not bad by any means, but you gotta kind of weigh the pros and cons and figure out what works for you. Finally, for leaders, we have the Yindig Infiltrator Commander, and oh boy does he know how to infiltrate. He's got all the same goodies as the Yindig troops that we'll cover in just a second, but with a better fight stat of 4+, and one of the craziest splats in the game. Hide in Shadows is basically a move out into the open like an idiot and get out of jail free card. You can literally stand in an empty cube with 0 cover, and your opponent can't shoot you. It's probably a good thing that the Yindig only gets Tactician 1, so you can't abuse this. The other amazing thing about this leader is he's only 20 points. 20 points! I think he might be my favorite leader in the Rebs faction, but it also depends on the mood I'm feeling. Alright, now that we've talked about leaders, let's talk about some troops. Sorak are probably my favorite alien creature design in Deadzone. I love the way they run around on their big arms, and they have the tiny arms so their waist should be that holds their weapons, and I just love it so much. Design choices aside, let's talk about their stats. They have a really weak stat line that doesn't bring much to the table, but they are very cheap, and in my opinion, often overlooked in the army list. The Blaster variant is easily one of the most point-efficient suppressing units in the game. Costing only 6 points, they are dirt cheap, and they can work really well with other units in your army. While the survive stat of 6+ is pretty abysmal, they can pin a whole cube of enemies with ease because you automatically hit the target, which is awesome. Granted, you don't know where they're going to go when you pin them, but you can suppress an entire cube of enemy models, which is really powerful, especially for 6 points. And the other variant we have is the Sorak Sword Spawns. I think they're a really interesting choice as well. They have Frenzy 2, which they'll probably need because they only fight on a 5+. They certainly aren't great, but at their low cost of 8 points, they really aren't a bad choice. Plus, if your opponent's shooting at your Sorak, it means they're probably not shooting at your other stuff, and that's a quality all in itself. On to the Rebel Trooper. This is the definition of cheap and mediocre, and I don't even mean that in a bad way. Rebel Troopers do nothing particularly cool except for the fact that they are really cheap and they have a gun and they can shoot stuff with mild effectiveness. Great for unlocking specialists, filling out lists, or claiming objectives, they are pretty much the least noteworthy entry, and that's alright with me. And if you know me, I love a good bargain, and that's exactly what these guys are. Bargain bin, nothing great, but they'll get the job done at a very, very cheap price. Yindig are quick, monkey-like creatures that have been reworked quite a bit over the years. They have a pretty mediocre stat line, but at a cost of only 10 points, and they have some really neat little tricks up their sleeves. Frenzy 1 built-in is helpful if you ever find yourself in a close-quarters scrap, and it also makes them a little bit better than the standard 5-up fighter. They also gain Agile, which rarely helps in the boards that I create, but can be really useful in games that have lots of ruined terrain, so you can get a lot more mobility and higher vantage points. Scout is an interesting new feature on them, and it's definitely a selling point. Just keep in mind how fragile they are with their 6-up save. I think they're definitely a step up in quality, if that's what you want to do, from the Rebel Trooper in just about every way for only 3 points more. And for some reason, my Yindig just love to roll incredibly well. Don't count on that because they probably won't for you, but I'm just saying, something about my Yindig are just spectacular. Sphere are another awesome looking race that are in the Rebs faction and definitely a fan favorite. Now that they have a troop profile, it makes them the kind of elite infantry of the Rebs list. 5+ on all their stats is nothing to be upset about, and AP1 on their gun is the true strength of this unit. However, they do have to pay for it, with a cost of 12 points. The Mako variant is the exact same profile, but it's on a bike, so you can't change cube height and you can't get higher vantage points, but you can zip around the base floor at a movement of a crazy fast 2 to 5 speed. Like I said in the intro, I think a variety in my Rebs list is the best way to go, and so having a little bit of elite infantry that has some good armor piercing is definitely a strong thing to have now. Plus the models are super cool looking. Zs are the smallest units in all of Deadzone, and they're basically a 15mm scale miniature in a 28mm game. Their stat line is pretty much trash, but it doesn't even matter. They are cheap as chips at only 6 points, and the best part is the fact that they are 0 victory points. Zs are the cheapest unlocks in the list, and amazing at hiding and sneaking around onto objectives, especially because they're so small that your opponent can't get a clear shot on them because they have the stealthy rule. I've been saying it for a while, and I'm curious how the 0 VP trash list can do just by swarming onto objectives and holding on for dear life, while costing absolutely no victory points to your opponent in the process. I will never be surprised to see these in a list, and I think they're actually a really, really good option. Oh yeah, and they have Hacker, so if they happen to stumble upon some intel that happens to be out in the field, they get 2 victory points instead of just 1. In addition, they can also access terminals and things in special missions, so what are you waiting for? Put some Zs in your list. Grogans are the first of the Rebs specialists, and they are a hardy race that carries around heavy weapons. Stats-wise, they have a decent profile, with the best stat being a 4+ save with Resilient 1 for 1 reroll. Having a 4+ save is rare in the Rebs list, and it gives them kind of a unique flavor compared to the other options. Grogans have a selection of 2 weapons, the first being an Onslaught Cannon. Aside from having a super cool name, this is a classic way-to-fire 1 suppression HMG-type weapon. This costs 16 points and does exactly what you think it would do. The second weapon is the Desolator, which is a gun with AP 3 for 14 points. It's hard to talk about the Desolator without comparing it to the Sphere Lancer, but I think they both have good qualities. AP 3 is really good for taking out stuff like vehicles and peacekeepers, even if the 5+ shoot isn't amazing. One of the best qualities of the Grogans is that they're only 1 victory point, and for weapon specialists, that's a pretty strong feature. I like Grogans a lot, and I think the model's really cool, which you're going to hear me say a lot. The Craw Warrior is an interesting unit that has changed a lot over the course of many editions. Sporting a classic terrible 6+ save in the Rebs list, it's a fragile unit that if it gets shot at, but it's pretty good when it gets up close and personal with a 4+ fight and frenzy. Similar to the Sorak, it has a blaster that can pin enemies. The Craw can also use aerial deployment, which helps them stand out. In addition to that, they have a jump pack in the form of wings. In classic Rebs fashion, it only costs 1 VP and 10 points. Fragile, but useful and mobile. Probably not the best option, but a cool model. Alpha Simian Brawlers are absolutely one of the best units in the army list. With a movement of 2-3, size of 3, fight of 4+, smash, and rampage, these Gorilla Boys are here to hit like a freight train. When I first saw this profile, I kinda thought it was lacking AP 1, but since I played them, I got to see firsthand how rolling a handful of dice every single fight test and having 5 HP points is totally worth its points. They are pricey at 3 victory points and 26 points apiece, so you definitely have to pay to get all the awesomeness. Also, the addition of Rampage means that if you use these guys, at some point, they're bound to go on a rampage against your own guys, but I think that's totally worth the risk, and these guys are an excellent addition to the Rebs list. Keeping in the theme of big models, we have the classic Teraton. Teratons are another really cool species in the Warpath universe because they're sci-fi giant space turtles that naturally teleport. What's not to love? Fun fact about Teraton biology. These big Teratons are females. We'll cover the smaller male Teratons in a second. Anyways, Teratons have a 4+ fight with AP 1, Armor 1, and Tough. They can hide and attack from unexpected areas thanks to teleport, and they are all around rock stars for the Rebs list. HP 4 is really good, especially because of Tough. These lovely ladies also have 2 one-use weapons, both toting strong rules in the form of Frag and It Burns. Clocking in at 30 points and 3 victory points, they aren't cheap, but they are well worth it for the crazy amount of utility and output that they provide. Judwon are yet another cool race in the Warpath universe. They're a race of pacifists who don't believe in committing violence. They do, however, fit into Deadzone as medics for the Rebs by helping the cause without killing. Medics are something I need to try more often in Deadzone. I really feel like they're useful, especially in the Rebs list with all the larger models like Teratons and especially the Alpha Simians, because you can stop them from rampaging. However, my issue with medics is that it seems like every time I put them into a list and points get tight, I end up cutting them first. I really like the Judwan medic a lot, and I definitely need to try it out more. After all, it is only 10 points. Survey drones used to be an absolute joke of a unit, but in 3rd edition, that's the case no longer. Another 0 victory point unit, but this time, it's extremely fast and mobile, making it perfect to zoom out onto an objective and just rack up the points. Oftentimes your opponents won't even waste their time trying to kill the little buggers because they're more trouble than they're worth. I think they're a really solid unit, and they can do a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff for your strike team. Give them a try, and have them sit on an objective and tell me they're not worth it. Teraton shock troopers are the smaller males of the Teraton species. They have a pretty solid stat line, nothing crazy, but pretty good all the way around. Teleport gives a lot of options just like the larger Teratons, but this unit is a little bit more consistent in the fact that they don't have one-use weapons, and it's always going to be more reliable. AP 1 on the shooting attack and smash in the melee means that they're a good all-rounder and a really cool miniature. 22 points and 2 victory points is fair for what you get, and it's yet another good option if you have the model for this guy. Rin nomads can be either troops or specialists. Much like the cell leader, the troop variant comes with dual pistols and dual knives for a jack-of-all-trades elite infantry unit. 4-up shoot is really good, but it shines a lot brighter in the specialist version of the Rin nomad, who sports a sniper rifle instead of the twin pistols. Rin snipers are very cool because they're so versatile, but they also suffer a little bit because they do everything so well, which means they really do pay for it in their points. My issue with them is that even though the 4+ sniper is really good, it's so much more expensive than the Rebs sniper that there's a decent chance you won't ever get to use the frenzy combat blades, and it's not ultimately worth it. However, they do have armor, which is a big deal, especially compared to the Reb sniper, because the Reb sniper is so delicate. The Sphere Lancer is a specialist that has AP 2 and a range of 4+, which is an obviously tasty combination. Although they're relatively fragile, they at least have a save of 5+. This is a really solid unit that finds its way into lots of Rebs lists because of the high AP, and the shoot stats are just such a great combo. Very straightforward, but very good. The Rebel weapons team is exactly what it sounds like. It's a heavy weapons team with a big heavy gun. In previous editions this had other weapon options, but now it's only a missile launcher. AP4 is strong, but it does come with a heavy keyword, so you can't move around and shoot without a command dice. At 17 points, I don't think this is a bad unit, but I think the other options are more appealing, like other anti-tank options like the Grogan with the Desolator, or Sphere Lancers, or other things like that. Having 4 HP is also pretty cool, but I just feel like they're kind of limited by not being able to move and shoot. Rebel snipers were once one of the best units in the whole game. Now they're a solid choice, but not the absolute powerhouse that they used to be. Only costing 15 points and having stealthy gives them a really good combination to be effective, but they do have that dreaded 6+ save and no armor. I guess it does depend on your playstyle, but I'm a little bit torn on these guys. They do, however, have no official model, so if you find a really cool sniper and you want to do it, go for it. Either that or you can convert one. I feel like they have good offensive output, but they just are too easy to kill. I don't know. What do you guys think? Rebel Engineers are a brand new addition to the Rebs army and have a profile that's reminiscent of a Forge Father Artificer. Having 5 ups on all the stats is pretty darn good, but the weapons are really where the attractive feature of this unit lie. The Power Claw with Frenzy 1, AP 2, and Companion means it'll be getting an extra dice every single fight action, and it can probably make it count with that AP 2. 14 points and only 1 victory point makes this a good close quarters option for your strike team. And if you're looking for an official model, by the way, it's in the Magnetar Marvel's Dreadball kit. I think it's a resin model, and it looks pretty darn cool. Might have to get that one. Striders are a good choice in every list they are in. Rebs have the advantage of having a large majority of their units being really cheap, so the points to fit a Strider into a list is far more achievable in the Rebs list. Striders are a lot to deal with, and their sheer hardiness is probably their strongest feature. High armor value of 3 and 5 HP means that your opponent has to commit a lot of stuff to this, or have an answer for it, because AP 1 or lower is just not going to get this thing destroyed. There are 3 weapon variants, and I personally think they're all pretty darn good, although other options in the list can perform very similar roles, but not in such a hardy package. I personally don't use Striders all that often, but it's not because they're not good, it's just not quite my playstyle. Striders are a big investment, and they can really shape your list in a really strong way, and I think all 3 of these options are pretty darn good. The Tigrex Outrider is the newest model for Rebs in Deadzone 3rd Edition, and it's got a brand new profile. But first, let me gush about this model before we get into the stats. The resin is perhaps the most handsome miniature in the entire Rebs range. The details are super crisp, the proportions are incredible. The Yindig rider on top just makes me an entire rework of the Yindig line because he looks so tribal in character, and oh my god, it's so cool. The sculpt is just so good. It's easily one of the best ones I've seen in Deadzone in a long time. Okay, that being said, let's move on to the stats. Defensively, this model is HP 4 and Armor 1 with a Survive of 5+, which is pretty darn good, but the real key to success is the fact that it has Stealthy. Offensively, the Outrider has AP 1 and Frenzy 1 with a Fight of 4+, and a movement of 2-3, making it quite the threat. I doubt Agile will come up all that often with this model, but Tenacious is pretty good so your targets can't get away. Overall, I think this is a really well-rounded piece that can bring some really good melee power and quick speeds, and due to the awesomeness of the miniature, I think it's going to find its way into a lot of my Rebs lists. Alrighty, let's talk about some living legends in the Rebs list. Sergeant Eric Umunster is an especially souped-up Grogan. He's got a similar profile to the Grogan Specialist, but with some key differences. As indicated by the model, he is Armor 1, which definitely helps with the Resilient 1 and the Survive of 4+. He's also got an offensive upgrade compared to the standard Grogan by sporting a 4+ shoot and the addition of a 1-use rocket salvo. Honestly, I think that this living legend is a little bit overpriced for what you get because the VPs cost a lot and he's 27 points, which is a lot of points on a Rebs list, and I just don't know if he's completely worth it despite all of his good qualities. He is really cool and flavorful and could be really fun in games, but I don't know if he's like the best choice, just a cool one. Hund is a ridden nomad living legend, and he's a really cool character with some really interesting set of rules. He's got the standard Rin profile with a sniper rifle, but instead of knives, he's got pistols, and in addition, he's got a better save at a 4+. He's also got Tactician 1, so if your leader gets offed, he can step in and provide command dice, which is always a pretty nice feature. Hund also has fire control, meaning he can shoot both his pistols and the sniper rifle on the same turn, but if you ask me, I don't really know how often this will really come up. Snipers like to stay really far back, and pistols like to be really up close and personal, so the combo might not happen all that often. He also suffers a bit from what a lot of living legends seem to suffer from, and he does cost 30 points and 3 victory points, which is pretty hefty. Edic Pamera is a named Yindig hero who's introduced a long time ago, and he's basically like a zombie apocalypse survivor kind of character, a la Daryl from The Walking Dead, but with an epic space lion monkey twist to him. He's got all the goodies that go along with being a Yindig, but he's also got stealthy, tough, and he shoots on a 4+ with a crossbow that has AP 1. Tactician 1 puts him in a really good place, and I think he's not only a really cool choice, but a very effective one. Clocking in at 25 points but 3 victory points, I do think he is one of the top choices for the living legends in the Rebs list. Adrienne Nikolovsky is a Sphere hero that is basically a special character version of the Sphere Lancer. She fights better, survives better, and wears armor. In addition, Adrienne has a very rare in 3rd edition hollow sight on her Magma Lance, so she always shoots with 1 extra dice, which is really powerful with that kind of weapon. The cherry on top is having Tactician 1, so she can function as a leader if your primary leader gets taken down. She also has some toxic pistols, but I don't really know how often you're going to pick that over the power of the Magma Lance. I know it's situational, and if you're fighting a big monster or something, it could come up, but ultimately I think you're probably going to pick the Lance almost every time. At a pretty reasonable 26 points, the only real downside is costing 3 victory points, but I do think she's worth it as a solid upgrade to the standard Sphere Lancer, and I think is probably the best living legend in the Rebs list, at least. Kira Nikolovsky is Adrienne's sister in the lore, but has taken quite a different career path while fighting for the Rebs. She is a combat medic with 5s on all of her stats and armor 1. She also carries around adrenaline and stimulant shots so she can kind of get where she needs to go and she can hit things when she really needs to. I think her ability to do stun is really interesting, but I don't know how often you're going to pick that over doing medic things. I also think it'd be really, really cool if she could give the shots to friendly units, but as it's written, I don't think that's a thing, unfortunately. I like her. She's definitely a medic with tons of bells and whistles and can do lots of things, but she does cost literally twice as much as a standard Jed 1 medic, so you kind of have to decide for yourself if you think that's worth it. And finally, to cap it off, let's talk about the equipment list. In Deadzone 3rd edition, the selection of equipment you're able to take changes pretty radically from faction to faction. In classic Reb style, they have access to just about everything, which makes them insanely customizable if you're into that sort of thing. I think including a defender shield for 5 points is a pretty interesting idea, but I'm not completely sold on who I would give it to. Maybe a Grogan or a Sphere? Personally, I believe in the tried and true tested motto of boys before toys, but there are lots of players out there that know how to maximize the effectiveness with the items list, and you have tons of options in this one. In conclusion, Rebs have an absolutely crazy amount of cool options and playstyles with an incredibly diverse model range. I think just about everything in Deadzone is pretty well balanced, so I don't think there's any unit selection that's straight up garbage or untakeable or so good that it's an auto-include. Play around with the faction and see what you think will work, and then just have fun taking down the corporations while you're doing it. But what do you think? What is your favorite Rebs selections? Comment below and let's get some discussion about the lovable underdogs. That's going to be it for me today, guys. So share the video if you found this helpful, and please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and keep rolling 8s. I'll see you in the next one.